The morning mist hung low and thick over the riverbanks, smelling of damp earth and deep, wild secrets. For Elias, a man whose life was measured by the rise and fall of the Zambezi, this was just another day. He was a fisherman, quiet and weathered, living on the fringes where the human world hesitantly nudged the vast, untamed heart of the African wilderness. Elias knew the dangers here. He knew the crocodiles lurking beneath the surface and the territorial cats that patrolled the thickets. He lived by a simple, unspoken rule: respect the wild, or the wild will consume you. But on this particular morning, as the first pale light of the sun began to burn away the fog, Elias stumbled upon a disrespect of a different kind, a violation of the primal order that governs the savannah. He was checking his lines, pushing through a dense cluster of reeds on a small, muddy tributary that fed into the main river. The only sounds were the slow lapping of the water against his dugout canoe and the distant chatter of birds. Then he heard it. A sound so small, so utterly out of place. It made the hairs on the back of his neck prickle. It was a weak, high-pitched mewling, a sound that spoke of desperate need, not predatory threat. Elias stopped, his heart beginning a slow, heavy drumbeat against his ribs. He gripped the worn wooden paddle in his hand, his eyes scanning the surrounding bush. A sound like that could be bait. It could be a young warthog or a terrified monkey, but the location felt wrong, too exposed. Slowly, carefully, he pushed the reeds aside, exposing a small patch of churned mud and dry grass. And there he was, a lion cub, no bigger than a house cat, curled into a tight, miserable ball. Its fur, usually a majestic tawny gold, was matted with mud and dust. It was trembling violently, not just from the morning chill, but from fear and exhaustion. Elias lowered his paddle, his breath hitched in his throat. A lion cub, alone. In this land, finding a lion cub alone meant only one thing. Its mother was either dead or very close by, hunting or warning him away. Every instinct Elias possessed screamed at him to retreat, to paddle back to the safety of his humble shack and forget what he had seen. Interfering with a lion's family was a death sentence, swift and brutal. Yet the cub did not move to flee. It simply shivered, its tiny body racked by tremors. Elias realized the mewling had stopped, replaced by a soft, frantic whimpering. As the light grew a little stronger, Elias took a step closer, his focus fixed on the cub's head. He looked for the clear, sharp eyes of a newborn predator, the eyes that would one day command the savannah. But the cub's eyes were dull, clouded. They did not track him. They did not blink or react to the sudden increase in light. They were wide open, yet utterly vacant. The cub was blind. This single terrible truth shattered Elias's fear and replaced it with a deep, aching pity. A blind lion cub, alone, shivering, and abandoned in a world that shows no mercy to the weak. This cub, which he instinctively named Kovu, had zero chance of survival. Zero. It wouldn't find its mother, wouldn't hunt, wouldn't even manage to find water before the sun climbed high enough to bake the life out of it. The jackals, the hyenas, even the largest river birds, they would find it first. The realization galvanized Elias. The rules of the wild still applied, but sometimes the deepest law of the wild is simply to survive. And today, survival required a man's intervention. He had to be fast. He peeled off his old, worn leather jacket, the one that smelled faintly of fish and wood smoke. He kept his movements slow and low, avoiding any sudden gesture that might frighten the tiny, defenseless creature. He didn't know if the cub could hear him, or perhaps smell him, but the shivering intensified as Elias drew closer. He knelt down, feeling the cold, wet mud seep through his trousers. He held the jacket open, speaking in a low, soothing murmur, the language of the river, which animals often seem to understand better than human words. "It's all right, little one," he whispered, his voice rough from years of solitude. "You're safe now. I'm taking you home." With one swift, deliberate motion, Elias scooped the fragile body into the soft lining of the jacket. The cub, Kovu, let out a startled, pathetic cry, and then inexplicably burrowed into the warmth of the worn material, mistaking the old fisherman for the warmth and protection of its lost mother. Elias felt the fragile bones beneath the heavy fur, the tiny heart hammering against his palm. He stood up, his blood rushing. The danger was not over. It had just begun. The mother lion, if she were nearby, would be enraged, and Elias was now carrying the scent of her missing cub. He had minutes, maybe less. He bundled Kovu tightly, holding him close to his chest, and moved with a silent, frantic speed that belied his age. He quickly reached his canoe, tossing the fishing gear aside. He placed the wrapped bundle gently at his feet, covering it with a piece of canvas to shield it from the air and keep the scent somewhat contained. He pushed off the bank with a powerful thrust of the paddle. He did not look back. Every shadow, every sound, every rustle of the dry grass made him think of the lioness charging out of the bush. He paddled for half an hour until the reeds gave way to open water and the familiar landmarks of his small camp came into view. He pulled the canoe onto the muddy bank beside his small, single-room wooden shack. He lifted the canvas. Kovu was quiet now, asleep perhaps, or simply too exhausted to cry anymore. Elias carried him inside. The shack was humble. A simple cot, a small stove, a table for mending nets. It was his world, and now it was the blind cub's world too. Elias realized he was trembling, not from cold or exhaustion, but from the magnitude of the choice he had made. He had invited the full force of the savannah's wrath to his doorstep. He carefully unwrapped the cub, placing him on a stack of clean, dry sackcloth near the stove, where a small fire was always kept burning. Kovu immediately protested the loss of the human warmth, his tiny head blindly searching for contact. Elias sat down beside him, running a cautious finger along the cub's spine. The skin was paper-thin, the ribs too prominent. The cub was starving. He looked at the tiny, milky white eyes. They weren't just shut. They were scarred, perhaps by a congenital defect or a terrible infection in the first few days of life. Kovu had never seen the sky, the sun, or the face of his mother. Elias knew he could not feed the cubfish. He had no milk, no powdered formula. He needed something, anything, to give this little scrap of life a fighting chance. But before he could even begin to solve the desperate logistical problem of raising a blind lion, Elias had to pause and acknowledge the small, brave community that makes stories like this possible. If you are finding yourself captivated by Elias's impossible choice, and if stories of second chances and the unbreakable bond between man and animal warm your heart, please take a moment right now. Hit that subscribe button and click the like button on this video. Your support is what allows us to keep telling these incredible stories of rescue, compassion, and the hidden miracles of the animal kingdom. Join our community and don't miss the dramatic next chapter in Kovu's life. Elias hurried outside. He knew a farmer, old Thomas, who lived a few miles inland and kept goats. It was a long walk and a dangerous one, but it was the only way. As Elias walked quickly away from the river, he looked back at his little wooden shack, now a sanctuary for the most vulnerable creature in the entire wilderness. Inside, the blind cub slept, oblivious to the journey that lay ahead, oblivious to the man who had risked everything just to give him a single chance to live. Elias prayed that the hyenas wouldn't smell the cub, or the lioness wouldn't return to the place of the disappearance and follow the scent trail back to his camp. The stakes could not be higher. Elias's heart pounded not from exertion, but from the raw, desperate urgency of his mission. He walked inland, away from the river that was his solace and his provider, toward the dry, rocky expanse where Thomas, the farmer, kept his small herd. The sun was rising quickly now, shedding the damp chill and bringing with it the intense, unforgiving heat of the African day. Every rustle of the dry grass made Elias flinch, convinced it was the sound of the lioness tracking him. He imagined her scenting the faint human trail mixed with the unmistakable, concentrated smell of her missing cub. He had wrapped Kovu tightly in the sackcloth and placed him carefully in a dark, warm corner of the shack, away from the tiny, smoke-venting window. He had left a small bowl of fresh water nearby, a gesture that was more about hope than practical use, given the cub's blindness and inability to lap. Elias knew this short walk was his window. If he took too long, the cub would succumb to dehydration and hunger. If the lioness was patient, she might already be waiting for his return. When Elias finally reached Thomas's homestead, a scattering of rough-hewn corrals surrounded by thorn bushes, he burst in, breathless and haggard. Thomas, a man as old and solid as the mopane trees that dotted his land, was startled. "Elias, what madness brings you so far from the water this early? You look like you've wrestled a croc." Elias leaned on the corral fence, gulping air. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Thomas, I need milk, goat milk, and a feeding bottle, a small one. I need it now, please." Thomas, sensing the fisherman's frantic desperation, didn't ask questions immediately. He simply fetched a clean, small bucket and began milking one of his quietest nanny goats. As the warm, creamy milk foamed gently in the bucket, Thomas looked at Elias, his eyes crinkling with concern. "That's not for a human child, is it, Elias? Your eyes hold too much fear for that." Elias swallowed hard, the magnitude of his secret feeling like a physical weight. He knew Thomas, like anyone who lived this close to the wild, would understand the danger. He would also understand the profound, inherent wrongness of what Elias was doing. "It's a cub, Thomas," Elias admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "A blind lion cub. Found him by the tributary, abandoned." Thomas stopped milking. The only sound was the chewing of the goat. The farmer looked at the fisherman, not with anger, but with a deep, unsettling sadness. "A lion! Elias, you know what you're doing. You are pulling the thread of a terrible knot. The mother will kill you. The authorities will take the cub and destroy it. You are risking everything." "He was blind," Elias repeated, as if this single word justified the whole impossible choice. "He was shivering. He had no chance. I couldn't leave him." Thomas sighed, running a hand over the goat's head. "Compassion is a dangerous luxury here, my friend. But I understand. We all have a soft spot, sometimes in the worst place." He finished milking, then brought out a small old bottle with a rubber nipple used years ago for orphaned lambs. "Take it all, and take this too." Thomas handed him a piece of dried venison, hard and dark. "You'll need energy, and if you have to leave the cub alone again, a scent of fresh meat might buy you time with the wild things, or at least keep the cub calm." Elias paid Thomas everything he had in his pocket, a few worn bills and a handful of small coins. It was a meager sum, but Thomas waved it off. "Just get that creature to live, and if you ever need help, send a signal fire. But pray you never have to." Elias took the milk and the bottle, the heavy feeling of doom lightened only slightly by the warmth of Thomas's reluctant support. He sprinted back, the miles melting away beneath his desperate anxiety. Back at the shack, the air inside was still and smelled faintly of wood smoke. Kovu was whimpering, a dry, pitiful sound that immediately drew Elias to the corner. The cub was thrashing his head blindly, desperately searching for the comfort that had been so briefly offered and then snatched away. Elias sat on the floor, holding Kovu carefully, the little body instantly recognizing the warmth and scent of his rescuer. Elias quickly poured the warm goat milk into the bottle. Now came the hard part. He tried to push the rubber nipple into Kovu's mouth, but the cub, weakened and confused, fought the foreign object. He batted at it feebly with his paws, turning his head away. Elias knew this was a critical moment. If the cub refused the feed, he would die within hours. Elias held Kovu close, tucking the cub's head gently beneath his chin. Imitating the position a mother lion might use, he let Kovu feel the steady, slow rhythm of his heartbeat. He spoke softly, endlessly, in that low, soothing river language. Then he gently held the cub's jaw and managed to slip the nipple past the tiny teeth. He squeezed the bottle slightly, releasing a few drops of warm, sweet milk. Kovu tasted it. The reaction was immediate and startling. The fight went out of the little body. The whimpering stopped. A strong primal instinct took over, and Kovu began to suckle with ferocious, if clumsy, intensity. Elias watched, tears blurring his vision, the relief so immense it almost buckled his knees. The life force was still there. For the next week, life became a simple, repetitive cycle. Check the nets, paddle quickly, run to Thomas for milk, feed Kovu every 3 hours, watch for signs of danger. Kovu was still blind, but he was no longer shivering. With the consistent warmth and nourishment, he began to plump up. His coat became softer, cleaner, and more golden. He grew slightly, his paws becoming noticeably larger, the promise of the predator he was meant to be, now contained within the shack. Elias quickly learned how to navigate Kovu's lack of sight. Kovu relied entirely on scent and sound. Elias moved slowly, announced his presence with a soft clap of his hands, and always kept the cub within the small, warm, familiar area of the shack. When Elias was in the shack, Kovu was either sleeping deeply after a feed or exploring. He didn't explore by sight, but by touch, nudging the floorboards, sniffing the edges of the cot, and learning the geography of his small world through his nose. His world was small, but it was safe. And there was the sound. Kovu loved to listen to the sounds of Elias working, the scraping of his knife against wood as he cleaned fish, the low, steady rhythm of his voice as he muttered to himself, the gentle whirring of his fingers as he mended nets. These sounds anchored Kovu, telling him that his protector was near. The bond formed quickly, fiercely, out of necessity and profound mutual vulnerability. When Elias sat, Kovu would clumsily climb his leg and find a comfortable place in the crook of his arm, often nuzzling the old fisherman's rough beard, purring with the deep, rumbling intensity that only big cats possess. It was a sound that shook the small shack, a lion's purr, yet it was the sound of complete trust, the sound of a child sleeping safely in its father's arms. But the danger was always there. The nights were the worst. In the darkness, the roar of the adult lions would sometimes carry on the wind, a deep, territorial sound that vibrated the shack's wooden frame. Elias would sit up on his cot, holding the small, purring Kovu tighter, his heart cold with fear. He knew the lioness was still out there. She hadn't forgotten. Lions possess phenomenal memories and an acute sense of smell. She would be searching the riverbanks, and sooner or later, fate, or perhaps just the sheer, terrifying reality of the wild, would bring her to his door. One afternoon, 3 weeks after the rescue, Elias was startled by a commotion at the riverbank. A sudden, loud splashing, followed by angry, guttural snarls. He peered through the small crack in his wooden wall. 2 male hippos, their massive, grotesque jaws wide open, were battling fiercely for territory, tearing up the mud and the reeds, right where Elias usually landed his canoe. The confrontation was spectacular, dangerous, and utterly captivating. As Elias watched this raw display of savanna power, he knew that the commitment he had made was bigger than just providing milk. Kovu was growing fast. He was starting to bite playfully. His tiny claws were becoming needle-sharp, and the sheer strength in his legs, even as he blindly stumbled, was increasing. The cub was no longer a house cat. He was becoming a predator, albeit a disabled one, and the time when Elias could simply keep him hidden was running out. He needed a long-term plan, a solution that went beyond a fisherman's shack and stolen goat milk. He needed professional help, But seeking it meant revealing his secret, and revealing his secret could mean the end of Kovu's life, or the end of his own freedom. This incredible journey of survival is unfolding before us, showcasing the lengths a human will go to save a life and the capacity for love even a blind cub holds. The story of Elias and Kovu is a testament to the fact that kindness can thrive even in the harshest places on earth. If this story has touched your soul and you are rooting for this unlikely pair, please take a moment to hit that like button one last time and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of compassion. Your support is vital as we move towards the most dramatic part of their story. Elias turned back to Kovu, who was now awake and batting blindly at the shadow of a fly on the floorboards. The cub's purr was a gentle rumble, oblivious to the battle raging outside his walls. Elias knew he couldn't keep Kovu here forever. The danger was escalating, from the external threats of the wild and the internal threat of Kovu growing into a creature the small shack could not contain. The future was a terrifying blank space. But as long as Kovu needed him, Elias would be there. He picked up the cub, holding the warm, heavy weight against his chest, and looked out towards the river. He had saved Kovu from the water, but now he needed to save him from the land, and perhaps from himself. 4 months had passed since Elias pulled Kovu from the river. The tiny, shivering bundle of fur was gone, replaced by a robust, nearly full-sized lion cub. Kovu was now the weight of a heavy dog, his paws enormous, his purr a constant deafening vibration in the small wooden shack. He was still blind, navigating his world with uncanny accuracy by sound, scent, and the invisible lines of trust that tied him to Elias. Elias no longer went out for long fishing trips. He stayed near the shack, terrified of leaving Kovu alone. The cub required large quantities of raw meat now, and Elias was forced to rely on Thomas, who, increasingly troubled, was supplying him with parts of dead livestock, a perilous arrangement that drew unwanted attention. The shack was too small. Kovu would often stumble, frustrated by the confined space, letting out low, grumbling roars that were too big for the structure that contained them. Elias knew the time for hiding was over. The cub was a lion, and his place was not here, but he couldn't simply release a blind predator back into the wild. Kovu would be killed instantly. Elias had made a mistake of the heart, and now the consequences were about to be paid. The air felt heavy that afternoon, the sky bruised with a coming storm. Kovu was asleep near the stove, his head resting on Elias's lap, when Elias heard it. It wasn't the distant territorial roar he knew from the nights. This was a deeper, resonant sound, closer and filled with a specific, focused rage. It was a lioness, and she was close. Elias froze, every muscle tightening. He lifted his head slowly, smelling the air. And there it was, a faint, musky, sharp scent that instantly cut through the wood smoke and the fish. She wasn't searching aimlessly anymore. She had found the human scent trail and followed it directly to the cub's concentrated aroma, which was now too strong to hide. Elias gently slipped his leg from under Kovu's head. He knew there was no time to run, no place to hide. The final moment had arrived, and Elias had only one choice: face the mother of the cub he had stolen. He moved to the small, reinforced wooden door, grabbing his old machete, which was more for show than defense against a lioness. His hands were steady, but his heart was a lump of lead in his chest. The sounds of the lioness stopped. Now there was only silence, the most terrifying sound in the savannah. She was waiting. Elias took a deep breath and opened the door, stepping out into the dim twilight. The lioness stood no more than 10 feet away, concealed partially by the high, dry reeds, but her shape was unmistakable, sleek, powerful, her muscles coiled like steel springs. Her eyes, glowing yellow in the dying light, were fixed on him. She did not roar. She simply waited, a statue of pure, patient fury. Elias dropped the machete. He raised his hands slowly, palms open, a gesture of submission. He was not a threat, only a tired old man. "He's blind," Elias whispered, the words catching in his throat. He was drowning. He had no mother. The lioness took a slow, deliberate step forward, her head low. The low, rumbling growl that left her chest was the sound of earth moving. It meant only one thing: death. Just as the lioness prepared to spring, the door behind Elias creaked. Kovu, alerted by the scent of his own kind and confused by the distress in Elias's heartbeat, had followed his anchor out into the world. He emerged blindly, bumping into Elias's legs, letting out a confused, high-pitched mewl, a sound that was a remnant of his kitten days. The lioness stopped. The growl died in her throat. Elias felt a cold dread wash over him. Now she would see the human's possession of her child and attack. But the lioness did not attack. She stared, not at Elias, but at Kovu. Kovu, still confused, turned his blind face toward the powerful presence in front of him and sniffed the air, taking in the alien scent of a lion that was not Elias. Then, the miracle happened. The lioness, who had been ready to tear the fisherman apart, took another step forward, her demeanor shifting from wariness to something else, something primal, yet heartbreakingly tender. She lowered her massive head and let out a soft, guttural chuff, a deep, rumbling sound that is the lioness's signature call of recognition to her cubs. Kovu froze. He tilted his head, listening to the sound that resonated deep within his bones. It was a language he had never heard, yet instinctively knew. He didn't hesitate. He stumbled forward directly toward the sound, toward the scent of his biological mother. The lioness met him halfway. She didn't pounce or snarl. She simply nudged Kovu with her nose, a gentle, familiar, motherly gesture. Kovu immediately recognized the feel, the sound, the powerful, life-giving scent. He pushed into her flank, purring furiously, searching for the familiar comfort he had lost. Elias watched, tears streaming silently down his weathered face. He understood now. The lioness hadn't abandoned Kovu because he was blind. She had left him because she couldn't protect him. A blind cub would slow the pride down, put the others at risk, or worse, be killed by the dominant male. She had hidden him, left him in the relative safety of the river reeds, praying that the elements, or perhaps a sudden, desperate kindness, would save him. She had been searching for him, not hunting the fisherman, but following the faint trail of her desperate hope. The lioness turned her large head and looked directly at Elias. Her yellow eyes held no fury, only a deep, ancient understanding. She had found her cub, and she knew who had kept him alive. It was time for the toughest farewell. Elias slowly walked toward Kovu, who was now nursing frantically at the lioness's belly. He knelt down, reaching out a hesitant hand. The lioness did not move to stop him. Elias stroked Kovu's golden mane for the last time. "Be well, little one," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are safe now. Go home." He stood up, gave one final nod to the lioness, and turned his back, walking slowly toward the empty shack. He did not look back, though he could hear the gentle, protective sounds the lioness was making over her cub. The door closed quietly behind him. Elias sat on the cot, the shack suddenly vast, quiet, and cold. He was alone, but the sound of the deep, powerful chuffing faded into the darkness, a promise of safety. The truth was that the mother lion hadn't abandoned her blind baby out of cruelty, but out of a desperate final act of love, knowing she couldn't keep him safe from the wild's harsh rules. The fisherman's intervention was the miracle she had silently hoped for, and the tears that streamed down Elias's face were not tears of loss, but of profound, aching relief. He had pulled a blind cub from the river and, against all odds, guided him home to the only mother who could ever truly protect him. He had risked his life not to own a lion, but simply to bridge the gap between human kindness and the brutal laws of the wild, allowing a blind baby lion to find his place in the world. And that, more than any catch of fish, was Elias's legacy. Thank you for joining us on this incredible emotional journey. If you found yourself moved by the sacrifice of Elias and the love of the lioness, please share this video with your friends and family. Your continued support helps us tell more vital stories of animal rescue, survival, and compassion. Until next time, remember that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever.